John Kennedy. Here's a whisper from a nurse. The next day, she's on the news. The fluorescent lights of Walter Reed National Military Medical Center buzzed softly, casting a sterile glow over the quiet hallway. It was well past visiting hours, and the usual bustle of the day had settled into a gentle rhythm of beeping monitors and muffled footsteps. Marina Lell, a nurse in her late 20s, pushed a cart of medical supplies down the corridor, her blue scrubs slightly wrinkled from a long shift. Her dark hair was pulled into a messy bun, and faint shadows lingered under her eyes, evidence of too many nights spent tending to patients who carried wounds far deeper than those visible on their skin. Marina had been at Walter Reed for 3 years, drawn to the work not by ambition, but by a quiet promise she'd made long ago to care for those who returned from war broken, to give them the dignity others might overlook. Tonight, her focus was on room 114B, where specialist Dean Granger lay, a man whose silence spoke louder than words ever could. Dean was in his early 30s, pale and still, his bed a small island in a sea of machines that tracked his vitals with relentless precision. Both of his legs were gone, taken by an IED in Afghanistan, and with them, it seemed, went his voice. Trauma had locked his words away, leaving only his eyes to tell his story, hollow at times, but occasionally flickering with something Marina couldn't quite name. Hope, maybe? Or memory? She'd spent countless hours at his bedside, changing dressings, adjusting IV lines, and talking to him even when he didn't respond. She read to him sometimes snippets of poetry or stories she found in old magazines, but what seemed to reach him most were tales of courage and patriotism, the kind that reminded him of why he'd served. Marina didn't know why those stories stirred him, but she'd seen his fingers twitch or his gaze soften, and that was enough to keep her trying. Tonight, as she checked Dean's chart, the hospital felt different. There was a subtle tension in the air, a hushed urgency that hadn't been there when her shift began. Whispers among the staff hinted at an unexpected visitor, someone important, though no one seemed to know exactly who. Marina paid it little mind. Her world was here in the quiet rooms where soldiers fought battles no one else could see. She adjusted Dean's blanket, her hands moving with the practiced care of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. "You're doing all right, Dean," she murmured, though she wasn't sure if he heard her. "We'll get through tonight together." His eyes stayed fixed on the ceiling, but she thought she saw a slight blink, a sign he was still there somewhere beneath the silence. As she stepped back into the hallway, the sound of purposeful footsteps broke her focus. 2 men in dark suits, earpieces barely visible, moved with the kind of precision that suggested authority. Between them walked Senator John Kennedy, his presence unmistakable even in the dim light. His suit was crisp, his posture relaxed yet commanding, and his eyes scanned the hallway with a mix of curiosity and respect. Marina froze her cart, squeaking slightly as she stopped. She'd seen politicians before. Walter Reed was no stranger to high-profile visits, but this was different. There were no cameras, no reporters trailing behind, no entourage of aides, just the senator and his escorts moving quietly through the hospital like they didn't want to be noticed. Marina's heart thudded. She wasn't one for politics. Her world was too small for that, too grounded in the immediate needs of her patients. But she knew who John Kennedy was, a senator from Louisiana, a man known for his sharp wit and deep commitment to those who served. She'd heard him speak once, on a grainy TV in the break room, his voice carrying a conviction that stuck with her. Now here he was, passing within arm's reach, his gaze briefly meeting hers as he nodded politely. The Secret Service agents kept their eyes forward, their presence a silent reminder of protocol, but Kennedy's nod felt personal, like he saw her, not just the scrubs. She should have let him pass. That was the sensible thing, the expected thing. Nurses didn't stop senators in hallways. They didn't speak unless spoken to. But something stirred in Marina, a quiet urgency she couldn't ignore. It wasn't about her or even about Kennedy. It was about Dean, about the man in room 114B who hadn't spoken in months, who'd lost so much, and yet still found a way to smile when she read him stories of valor. She thought of the way his eyes had welled up earlier that day, not from pain, but from something deeper, something that felt like being seen. She couldn't let that go unnoticed, not when someone with the power to make a difference was standing right in front of her. Her mouth went dry and her hands tightened on the cart. The agents were already moving past Kennedy's footsteps, echoing softly. It was now or never. "Senator," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, trembling with the weight of what she was about to do. The word hung in the air, fragile and uncertain. One of the agents turned sharply, his hand hovering near his earpiece, but Kennedy stopped, his head tilting slightly as he looked back at her. "Yes?" he said, his tone gentle but curious, his southern drawl softening the edges of the moment. Marina swallowed, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure he could hear it. "I'm sorry, sir," she said, her voice still low, as if she were afraid of breaking something sacred. "I'm just a nurse, but there's something I need to say, for someone who can't." The agent closest to her stiffened, his eyes narrowing, but Kennedy raised a hand, a subtle gesture that stilled the tension. He took a step closer, his expression open, inviting her to continue. "Go ahead," he said softly, and in that moment the hallway seemed to shrink, the world narrowing to just the two of them and the weight of her words. Her voice shook as she spoke, but she pressed on, driven by a force she didn't fully understand. "There's a patient in room 114B, specialist Dean Granger. He's a veteran, lost both legs in Afghanistan. He doesn't speak anymore, not since the trauma, but he listens. I read to him sometimes stories about courage, about this country. He smiles, sir. Not often, but he does. Today he cried, not because he was sad, but because he felt something, like he mattered." Her voice cracked and she paused, her eyes dropping to the floor. "He's losing hope. I don't know why I'm telling you this. Maybe because no one else really listens. Not the way he needs." The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the faint hum of the hospital. Marina dared to look up, expecting to see impatience or dismissal, but Kennedy's face was unreadable, his eyes locked on hers. For a moment, she thought she'd made a mistake, that she'd crossed a line she couldn't uncross. But then he spoke, his voice low and steady. "What's his name again?" he asked. "Dean Granger," she said, her voice steadier now, as if saying his name grounded her. "Specialist Dean Granger." Kennedy nodded, a slow, deliberate motion, and his gaze drifted toward the direction of room 114B. "Thank you," he said simply, and with that he turned, his escorts falling into step as he walked down the hallway. Marina stood frozen, her hands still gripping the cart, her breath shallow. Had she done the right thing, or had she just made a fool of herself, risking her job for a moment of reckless hope? She didn't know, and the uncertainty gnawed at her as she watched Kennedy disappear around the corner. She forced herself to move, pushing the cart back toward the nurse's station, her mind racing. But curiosity, or maybe instinct, pulled her back toward room 114B. She paused at the